everybody and welcome back to another video by Funland Tutorials. So in our previous video we wanted to find out the difference between pooled data and panel data, and in my last video I tried to explain you the what actually is pooled data. Pooled data is sort of like pooling. So when you go for carpooling, what do? You a lot of people get with the same destination. They get up from different places and they use the same transport to go to a different destination, but there's just one destination, right? It's not like there are 11,000 different destinations and people. It's not a public transport, it's a pool. So different people going to the same destination, so it's the same. There are different people that have been observed, different sets of observations. It's not necessary that I have said that in the end of the previous videos as well. It's not necessary that this cross section and this cross section has to be the same, and I am recording its development over the years. I'm just interested in how these particular attributes affect the marks of a particular student. That sort of explains what is pooled data. So the analysis is still cross-sectional in the sense that I still want to see how these particular attributes are affecting a particular cross-sectional unit and how it varies across cross-sections. So my focus is still cross-sectional variation. In this video, I am going to try to explain to you what is panel data. Panel data. Panel data is essentially it records or it analysis of variation. Let me just correct that. So it's the analysis of variation. Please don't confuse it with the ANOVA. Let me change my words. Analyzing the variation. This is for using Z. Not using Z rather. Analyzing the variation across cross sections. This part is the same as cross-sectional unit, cross-sectional analysis, cross sections, as well as across time, right? So essentially there are two sources of variation. Now this actually brings in the main difference between what is panel data and what is pooled data. As I mentioned before, pooled data is still cross-sectional, but panel data is not cross-sectional because there are two sources of variation. This is a very important sort of feature of panel data, and it serves to bring out the advantage of using panel data in different analysis. So there are two sources of variation. Now what does that come into play in understanding the difference between pooled data and panel data? Here, as I have mentioned, I guess countless times, this cross section and this cross section may not be the same. I do not care to find out how a particular student increases his or her score by putting in more effort, coming closer to the school campus, so on and so forth. I am just interested in how these variables affect the 80, 90, 70, 89, 100 scores. Just a particular cross-sectional variation. If a student puts in more effort, will their scores improve? If a student lives near the school campus, will their marks improve? How this variation occurs for a particular cross section. It's not dependent on time. There is no role of time in this analysis because it's purely a cross sectional analysis, and cross sectional analysis follows variation within the cross sections. So we are collecting data over the years simply to increase the number of data points. There is no reason for me to choose 23 over 22. I could have taken the data for 2023, 2020, 2015, 1994 and 1987. That probably would have of course, for practical reasons, these variables, the role of these variables probably would have been different. The access to education could have been different. But other than that, nothing stopping me from at least using 2023, 2022, skipping over 2021 and going to 2020 and 2019 and 2018. So there is no role of time in this analysis. It's purely for increasing the number of data points. I do not have data for a single year, so I am adding in, pooling in. Basically, when we are pooling transports, what we are doing is, I don't have a car, so I am asking somebody else, excuse me, can I pool with you? So you'll be bringing your car to my home, I'll be getting up and we'll go to the same destination, which is cross-sectional analysis. That is my singular destination. It's just to increase the number of data points, the role of the years. There is no other role of the years. But when we move to panel analysis, there is a role of the year. So two sources of variation. Now if I want to sort of copy the same structure, so suppose I still want to find out how the marks of the students change. Let me just copy that and I'm going to paste that over here. That's done, and let me now write down my focus. So I'm still collecting the data about the marks of the students, but this time let me copy all of this as well, and I'm going to paste it over here. So it's not going to be the same problem anymore. It's a different problem. So this is case 2. Collect the data about the marks of the score of the students across years. Now you might say across years was again true for the previous case as well, but as I said before, whether I'm taking it across years or not, yes, sort of it plays a role in the sense that it increases the sample size of my data set. So I can add across the years, but it does not change my analysis. My analysis is still cross-sectional variation, but over here cross-sectional and time series. So there are two aspects of my study now. Focus, record the different attributes of a particular that affects the students and how it evolves over time. So as I have mentioned before, I want to find out how efforts used by a particular student or distance between the home and the campus of a particular student affected marks, and how it changes across the students. So if there's another student who is putting more effort, will they get more marks in the exam? That is how I want to analyze my problem. But here, how it evolves over time. So my biggest difference is, I'm going to color this and I'm going to color this. These two data points, they have to belong to the same, they have to be the same student. So I have to record 2023's score of a student and 2022 score of that particular student. So these 10 students have to be the same, and I have to know that okay, this student scored 80 in 2023 and scored 89 in 2022. So I will be going back to my efforts column and finding out, did that student put in more effort? Did that student come closer to the campus? Was there any change in the financial status of that student? So I want to see how it evolves over time. So for that particular student as well, how it evolves over time. So right now I cannot choose, as I mentioned here, collecting data over the years. Not necessarily the same observation, this does not hold for panel data. So for panel data, the cross-sectional units, what do I mean by cross-sectional units? These are the observation points, the sample points. These are the cross-sectional units. The cross-sectional units have bold, italics, underline. If I could, I'm just going to put in all of them because this is a must. So cross-sectional units have to be the same. Why is that? Because I want to find out how a particular student evolves over the years. I want to find out if their change in efforts or their change in this distance is probably not going to change, but there are sometimes cases where a student might actually rent a hostel or rent an apartment to live closer to their campus so that they can spend less time commuting and more time studying. So distance, effort, if they change for a particular student, how does it change their marks. So this time this year column becomes very significant because I want to find out how it changes over the time. This is one way of representing panel data. There are other ways of representing panel data. Actually, there are two ways. So when we look at multidimensional, so as you can see, there are different dimensions here. Marks is one dimension, effort is one dimension. By dimension I mean variable under study. So if it's a multivariable data representation, it's marks, efforts, distance and financial status that I am considering. So there are 4 variables or 4 dimensions that I have considered over here, and the representation for that will be like this. But if we are looking for one variable, then the representation for panel data is very specific, very particular, and very it's very noticeable. So in the next video I am going to be explaining the representation of panel data in for one variable. Subsequently I will be doing it for panel data for multivariable, and I will be showing how significant is the role of time series. In fact, based on how the data looks like, I can actually decide whether I want to put more focus on the panel, the time series aspect or the cross sectional aspect. So as I've mentioned before, there is a cross sectional aspect to panel data as well as a time series aspect to a panel data. So I'll be explaining how, based on the different the style of the data, the type of the data that I have, what are the data points that I have, I can decide whether I want to focus more on cross sectional and time series. But the fact that I want to see how it evolves over time, this analysis remains. I am interested in seeing how it changes over time, and that sort of is the main difference between pooled data and panel data. In pooled data, I am not interested in how it changes over time. I just need more data, and I want to see how efforts and these variables affect marks. But in panel data, I want to see, okay, so that student put in this much effort in the year 2023 to get 80, and that same student put in this much effort in the year 2022 to get 89. What were the reasons for the change in the scores? So I am looking at the year as well. This column becomes significant. In the previous year, I could have very well done my completed my analysis if I were to drop this column. But in case of panel data, I cannot do that. Year is a very, very significant. In fact, it is as significant as the unit itself when I am talking about panel data analysis. So that sort of explains why pooled data and panel data have to be specified, which one I am using, because one is a panel and the other is a cross-sectional analysis. And in the next video, I am going to be showing how a single variable panel data is represented in matrix form, and look forward to it. So, thank you.